Those of you out there in my audience who are also big fans of the Patriot Nurse and follow her channel are probably by now well aware that over the past 3 to 6 months, she has been promoting this very interesting and unique herbal preparedness course. She'd spent a great deal of time studying the use of plants and herbs and their role in giving us the ability to begin to divorce ourselves from the very corrupt medical industrial complex. Now, if you would like to avail yourself of that, it's not a hard thing to find. It's all over at her channel, patriotnurseacademy.com/herbal preparedness. There's a video that you can watch that outlines it. Would highly recommend it. But in her video a couple days ago, she mentioned also, because of the housing crisis and things that are going on in the markets, that we might be looking at perhaps a return to some type of serfdom. Now, when she used that medieval term, it kind of clicked in my head, the idea of serfdom and life in the Middle Ages and the use of herbs and apothecaries. And I kind of threw that all into an AI generator and I came up with this. It's an interesting study in the mind because it has to do with something called the framing effect. Now, just to be very clear, would highly recommend her course. Highly recommend it. This is one of those types of things that once you understand it, once you learn it and you take it with you, it's something that will be an asset for your entire life. And it's also something that you could use as a blessing for others. And it could be the difference maker in a society. And that's kind of what a society of any size. And that's what kind of the topic of today's video here is. Now, real quick, Battlefield of the Mind, as always, these are the types of videos I think are going to be crucial going forward. The ability to stop, get away from the propaganda, get out of our fields, get out of our feely fields, and engage the brain and start thinking about things critically. If you'd like to join us over the Patreon channel, where we talk about this in depth, $1 single US dollar per month, even less if you sign up for an entire year, fully refundable. First 90 days, no questions asked, partnering with Vimeo and Patreon. We can take the gloves off. God bless all of you. Thank you who have already joined us over there. Would love to have you. Now, real quick, Psychological Operations 101, the framing effect. Everything is relative. Everything is relative. Perception is reality. When you reframe something by placing it into a new context, you can change the way people perceive it. Now, for proof of this, let's talk about life back in the Middle Ages, life back during medieval times, perhaps Europe. We can show an image like this, somewhat idyllic, and you have these little homes amongst rolling hills, and you've got sheep kind of grazing just everywhere. A little path looks like you can see some farmers' implements off in the distance, and it just seems like a very peaceful and serene scene. And that would be accurate, I'm sure. But this image would also be accurate. There were times when things were very difficult in medieval times, and people were serfs and people were peasants, and the idea of getting ahead and moving out of your station, or even traveling away from your village for any amount of time, was just beyond reach. So everybody had to find a way to kind of work together to make the best of what they had. Nobody forced them to do that. It was just something what was the natural state of things. You had, of course, the farmer, and you had the bread maker, the blacksmith, the cobbler, the butcher. You could go right down. You had the scribe. Whatever role could be played in society was. Now, everybody had to eat. Everybody had to have shelter. Everybody performed a role that was a little bit of a blessing to everyone else. Now, it wasn't every day that somebody needed the blacksmith to do something, but it was every day that the blacksmith needed to have a meal. needed to have a place to lay his head. The blacksmith needed, clothes and shoes just like everybody else did, but not every day was there a need or a use for his services or skills, but he still had to be there. The bread maker had to feed people every day. Regardless of what his needs were, what he wanted to do, every day people needed bread. The farmer had to work and had to make sure that there was plenty of grain to get through the winter. All of these things had to happen. Now, this, by definition, is basically forced socialism by circumstance, not by government. You see, it didn't necessarily matter, like, for example, if the cobbler had any gold or not. This was the guy that made your shoes. Everybody had to have shoes. So if the cobbler went to the bread maker and said, hey, I need a loaf of bread, the cobbler gave him one to eat. And, of course, the bread maker knew that, with the proper amount of materials, that when the bread maker needed a new pair of shoes, the cobbler would then provide it. Regardless of whether it enriched the cobbler or not, that bread maker was the one feeding him. Same thing applied for the butcher. Same thing applied for all jobs in the town. Everybody was trying to pull together. But there were also things that went on that weren't necessarily required, but they made life better. And if you probably asked the scribe, the butcher, the cobbler, all these guys, what the best part of their day or what's the best part of their life was, they'd probably all have different answers, but I'll guess that they probably would refer to something that happened down at the local tavern. And that was the best part of their day, regardless of what their role in life was. I hear, and the reason I talk about all this is that I hear this repeated meme that there is some government plot conspiracy that you will own nothing and be happy. Well, truly, back in this era, people didn't. They were largely serfs. They were largely servants, and primarily, they served each other. And that's kind of a hard thing to wrap your mind around. It's like, every day I do this same thing over and over again, and I don't get ahead. Well, whatever you're doing, it's blessing somebody somewhere. See, I'm sure that not every day in medieval times was somebody sick and in need of an apothecary, but the apothecary still had to be there. And whatever his or her needs were, whether they were clothes or shoes or bread or water or meat or whatever it might be, everything had to be supplied regardless of profit motive. Regardless of profit motive, especially when you're tending animals. A lot of work goes into farming and tending animals that doesn't pay off right then and there, right that moment in time. And if everybody can retire to their home, no matter how humble that evening, having had a meal, having had their basic day-to-day needs met, that was something to be thankful for back then. This is largely how the Amish live in North America today. They don't seek personal advancement. And when you look at the way they live, they don't advertise it on the outside, but it's basically socialism. It's not government imposed, but it's self-imposed, and you would have to ask yourself that question. If that's the direction we're heading, would it matter what government's opinion of where we should go is? Because I think that's where a lot of people are right now. I think there are a lot of folks out there that are like, Lord, give me what I need today. As long as I have what I need and those around me and those that I love have what they need and their needs are met, and we can put our head on the pillow this evening and go to bed, we can face tomorrow together. In fact, I think there's an old hymn that talks about this. Probably quite a few old hymns that talk about that. This idea of not looking so far in the future and wondering, in 10 years, will I be richer? In 20 years, will I be richer? It's a return to a value system that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily ascribe to America, but some might say it's a preferable way to go. Some have all, old wisdom has said a hard day's work is its own reward, is it not? How many of you out there heard a parent or a grandparent or maybe even a great-grandparent say that? That a hard day's work is its own reward. No matter what you're doing. Especially if you know that it helped your neighbors. Regardless of what that service was and whether it was that day that it was needed or that week whether it was needed. There are certain things in life that can't really be quantified. Some have railed against the idea of strong drink. It isn't the drink, it's the feeling. It's kind of one of those kind of heady concepts that, people go and they find a substance like this and they imbibe it and it gives them a certain feeling. That's what they're exchanging their gold for. The feeling. No person is being purchased. There are folks out there who work very hard, think, gosh, this feels like slavery, this feels like slavery. If you're doing for others and they're blessed by it, it's not slavery. If you're doing for others and they're blessed by it, regardless of what your role is, it's not slavery. It's service. And I will leave it there. So I'm sure there are many other jobs in medieval society that I forgot to list here. These were just examples. But I think this idea of the bread maker is key because, he could load up, in the morning and get everything he needs and then, make just tons and tons of loaves of bread. And he could go to every single person in the town and provide that and probably, get either something for it or a promise of future services for it. Who was going to chop the wood to fire the oven? I'm sure he could probably take loaves of bread down to somebody who would say, okay, I'm gonna chop the wood for you so that you have your wood so that I can have bread. And you can do this with any iteration of things, but I think it's personally really neat. I think it's super interesting that somebody in our real sphere right here is actually taken up this mantle. Herbalism and the idea of being an apothecary is just absolutely fascinating to me. She's got a whole wall in one of her videos. I'll have to see if I can find it. It's really great. It's got all the glass jars on it, and all the glass jars are all labeled, and they all have their role, and it's really, kind of a neat thing to see. So I hope I didn't cross any lines by, creating the AI images, but that's just kind of how I see it. So I will leave it there. But God bless all of you. Thank you so much for your support at Patreon. Very, very much appreciate it. Like I said, it's $1. Lowest possible allowable level per month. And if you sign up for a year, it's even less than $1 a month. It's like 3 pennies per day and fully refundable first 90 days. And here's the best part. That 90 days is a rolling 90 days. Let's say you decide to stick around 4 months. You can still you won't get your first month back, but you'll get the previous 3. So I will leave it there. God bless. Pray for each other. Pray for me. I'll pray for you. Pray for the Patriot Nurse. Lift each other up. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.